Key is a company that should need no introduction. At least I would say that if this was 10 years ago, but now a lot of people maybe aren't as aware of them as they should be, especially as their anime adaptations have been coming out less and less frequently. Their visual novels and their adaptations are foundational, and some of my favorite anime are their adaptations, most notably shows like Kanon, Planetarian, and of course, Clannad. So now, after quite a long time, we have finally gotten a new adaptation, that of the 2018 visual novel Summer Pockets, this time being done by Studio Feel, which is their first attempt at doing a Key adaptation. And so with 26 episodes now out and completed, what were my thoughts on Summer Pockets? This show became something that I looked forward to so much every week across the spring and summer seasons, at various points becoming the show that I looked forward to the most each week. Summer Pockets, unsurprisingly, is taking place in the summer, specifically the summer of the year 2000. Feel really did an amazing job at animating this show and making the environments lived in and beautiful. Some of the backgrounds here are just stunning, and they really make you want to be there to actually experience some of these locations, which is something that any good Key adaptation will do. It's something that I felt while watching Air, Kanon, Clannad, the majority of them, which shows that even though it's not Kyoto Animation behind the helm, Feel still understood something very integral to these adaptations, and that is making these settings, these worlds, feel charming, beautiful, and genuine. Where Summer Pockets deviates from the other Key anime adaptations is in how it chooses to adapt its arcs, although there is a very good reason for that. Other Key anime, and the majority of visual novel adaptations in general, take all of the different universes, the different routes of the visual novel, and try to turn them into a single linear story, with the characters moving from one to the next without any sort of timey-wimey shenanigans. Summer Pockets is different in that each arc resets back to the beginning. Now, there is a very important plot reason why this happens. This isn't like Amagami SS, which just happened to choose to adapt it that way and have each arc reset and do this omnibus format. Summer Pockets has a specific reason for doing it. Because of those really important plot reasons later that I'm going to try my best not to spoil for anyone who hasn't seen the show yet, it had to be done this way. Which, for anybody who is a fan of a particular girl, more so than any of the others, you're going to be happy because they get their own arc. All four of the main heroines have their story told. And by and large, I really enjoyed this cast of heroines. Kamome is probably my favorite just because I enjoyed her personality and interactions with our main character, Hairi, the most. But I wouldn't fault anybody for picking Ao or Shiroha as their favorites either. The only one I really didn't gel with is Tsumugi, and that's mostly just because I don't like the type of character that she is. And I think her arc in general is pretty easily the weakest of all of them. It just feels a little bit too convoluted, a little bit too messy. Not that it's confusing or difficult to follow. There's just a little bit too much going on, and I don't think the romance is particularly strong or even all that believable at the end of the day. But the other arcs, I think, are very well done, and the other characters, I think, are very well done. Kamome's arc especially is very interesting because it really does play with your expectations, especially if you are someone who has experienced other Key stories. For the first couple episodes, you definitely think it is going in a certain direction, and that's because the show intentionally is trying to make you think that. But once you finally learn what is actually going on, it's actually very impressive. I really do appreciate how the show is able to change things up and go against expectations without it feeling contrived or unjustified. It's very, very well written, in my opinion. That being said, I know that there are people who started watching Kamome's arc and actually dropped the show partway through because they thought they knew where it was going. And I really feel bad for those people because if they had just finished the arc, they would have completely had a different opinion on it. Because had it gone the way it was making you think it would go, yeah, it would not have been that great. It would have felt very silly. Man, I really hope those people come back to it and finish this arc and continue to watch the show because the concerns they would have had for the arc are completely undone by the time you get to the end of it. When you've experienced so many Key stories, the main male protagonist is typically one of the most entertaining characters. They usually do have a good amount of depth and personality to them, and they certainly are memorable and stand out. Hairi doesn't really have the qualities of those other characters, and on the one hand, you could say it makes him stand out because he's different, but it also just makes him come off as kind of bland because you're taking away a lot of those interesting qualities that the other characters had in these other anime. And I don't mean to say there's nothing to him, but he does, in a lot of arcs, come off as kind of a blank slate, as just like a generic guy who occasionally does something a little funny, but he really doesn't have the classic key snark. And I think that that quality not being there for whatever reason is a detriment to his personality and his character overall. There is a little bit there with his backstory, even though I don't think it gets focused on nearly as much as it should, given how fundamental it's supposed to be to his character, to his trauma. I just wish that there was more to him. You could say it's not the worst for a character in his position to be a little bit self-inserty, but in general, I think we all want our characters to be better than just self-inserts, and I would have expected more out of a key protagonist than what we got out of Hayate. It's not enough to damage the show in any way, because I think the heroines make up for it, the world makes up for it, and the story makes up for it. But it is nevertheless a weakness to this particular series that needs to be acknowledged for better or for worse. Despite things resetting after every arc, the show does a very good job of building up towards the ultimate main story. And I think that story is incredibly well done. There are a few moments where maybe it gets a little bit too convoluted, but not to the point where I think it is significantly detrimental. I think that by the end of it, you are going to feel something for these characters and for the sacrifices that they've had to make in order to achieve the ending that we end up with. Most of the key stories go for, I would say, one of two endings. Either a all happy ending where basically everything, or at least the majority of things, are resolved. Even if it may come off as a little bit unrealistic, you're still going to be happy for it because of the challenges the characters have gone through and overcome. Or they go for more of a melancholic silver lining kind of ending where good things have happened, but at significant cost. And sometimes they don't get the balance there correctly. One of the things I discussed in my video comparing the two Air adaptations, the one from Kyoto Animation and the movie from Toei, is that they both handle that silver lining ending differently and get the balance different as well. I don't think the anime adaptation of Air achieves that balance properly. I think the sacrifices are too great for what is achieved for that silver lining, whereas I think the movie balances it out a lot better. Summer Pockets definitely goes for that latter type of ending, that silver lining. Yes, something very significant has been sacrificed, but look at what has been gained because of it. And I think that ending does work very well here and is, for the most part, balanced out well. The only thing I would say, and again, I'm going to try not to spoil anything specific, because I don't want you to be spoiled about this. I want you to go into it not knowing what's going to happen and appreciate it all the more for that. But there are certain things, certain positive things that come out of this ending that I'm not sure entirely make sense, given the things that were sacrificed and the changes that are made. For some characters, it makes sense that, oh, this problem has now been resolved. That problem has now been resolved. For other characters, I don't quite understand why their issues have now been resolved. And you really just have to go with it and accept that things are different now. And that's fine. I don't mind it having this happier ending, because again, a lot of key stories just go for that straight happy ending. This isn't quite like that because, again, significant sacrifices have been made to achieve this end. And I'm not complaining that those characters get that happy ending. I just feel like I can't quite follow the logic as to why that has happened, why they've been able to get there. And I'm not necessarily saying I don't think they should have had that happy ending. I just wish that maybe there was more of a through line to justify it, if that makes sense. It's not something that ruins the ending by any means. I think the ending is very well done, but it is something that lingers in the back of my mind. How much it's going to bother you is going to vary from person to person. It may not bother you at all, and honestly, I hope it doesn't. Then you're going to think it's all the stronger. Something notable to mention, since we are talking about the ending, is that it really isn't the ending, at least not in terms of the visual novel, because while the original Summer Pockets game from 2018 has been adapted, you could debate how well it was adapted and how much stuff was left on the cutting room floor, but it has been adapted. There was a re-release of that game that included more content called Reflection Blue, and that has not yet been adapted. Now you may think, well, it very well may not be. This could be the end of the Summer Pockets anime, and there's no reason to think that Reflection Blue will get an anime adaptation. However, a particular character from Reflection Blue, and only Reflection Blue, was included in the openings and the endings for the Summer Pockets anime. Which of course leads me to believe that Feel has every intention of adapting Reflection Blue at some point. They have not yet announced that, which is kind of surprising to me. I would have expected it to happen right at the end of the show or shortly thereafter, but I would be stunned given that they went through the effort of putting this character and hinting at this character in the openings and endings if they do not actually follow through on adapting the rest of the story from Reflection Blue. So because of that, I don't think this is really the ending. It is an ending, and it's a very good ending, but there probably will be more at some point. Whether it will enhance this ending or take away from it, I do not know, but it is something to keep in mind that very likely this is not the end of the anime story. So ultimately, I was very impressed with Summer Pockets. I don't think it's on the same level as Kanon or Clannad. I do think that Heidi being kind of a weak main character does take away from the show a bit. I'm not a huge fan of Tsumugi or her arc, and there are a couple things here and there that are probably a little too convoluted for their own good. But by and large, I do really like the other heroines and this world and the story. I think the ending is very powerful and achieves a mostly very good balance for that type of silver lining ending that Key sometimes likes to go with. And I would say to any of those people who dropped the series and to anyone who hasn't watched it and was maybe hesitant because of the way other Key adaptations have gone recently, please try this out. If you are a fan of Key and their anime adaptations, you definitely owe it to yourself to watch this. And even if you're not, if you like a good romance anime, if you like atmospheric anime, if you just like good anime, you should go and watch Summer Pockets. This is a good show. It's not just a good Key show, it's a good show in general. And given that this is the first real Key adaptation we have gotten in a long time, I think more people need to see this so that hopefully we can continue to get more Key adaptations at some point in the future, because there are a number of visual novels that have yet to be adapted. As someone who has long had this itch of wanting to see more shows in the same vein as Kanon or Clannad, getting Summer Pockets now has definitely helped to alleviate that itch, at least to some extent. And I hope that it will help to do the same for all of you. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And until next time, take care everyone. Look forward to the next video.